Welcome to Avalon's Behind the Scenes, the association board and business partner connection. In this series, we'll dive into one of the most important, yet often overlooked, facets of running an association: your relationship with the professionals who serve you, from landscapers to attorneys. You will be hearing directly from the business partners themselves as they share insights on improving communication, addressing common challenges, and getting the most value from the work they do for you. Our goal is to help every board member strengthen these vital partnerships and ultimately enhance the quality of service your association receives. In this video, Mark Jones, the CEO of Avalon Management, meets with Adam Armit from Harvest Landscape, one of the larger landscape companies in Southern California. So without further ado, let's go directly to the interview.
So with me today, I've got Adam Armit.
Hi.
And why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi.
And if you could, tell us what led you to specialize in the area.
Oh, wow. That's a very long question, or short question with a long answer. But my name is Adam Armit. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for Harvest Landscape. We are a top 100 landscape firm, and we do landscape maintenance operations, basically, and tree care operations in Southern California, excluding the LA market. So we have Coachella Valley here, where we're in the studio right now, in the Inland Empire, but also San Diego and Orange County.
That's awesome. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks.
In what ways are HOA contracts different from other clients in your field?
You know, our firm specializes in HOA, so most of our portfolio is HOA, but we do multifamily apartments. We do some commercial work. And I would say that, the fact that an HOA is a home, it's where people recreate, where they need to unload from their workday, where their children are raised, where they walk for exercise. This is, the place that they live. So HOA contracts just have such a more personal, in-depth touch to them, where, maybe some of the commercial complex buildings or something like that, it's just mow, blow, and go and get out of here. Where with the HOAs, we just have to have more on hand, more touches, more feel, and just make it more homey.
That's awesome. That's great. And then what type of HOA communities have you typically worked with, like size, and how do these experiences change the way you approach new clients?
That's a pretty interesting question. I would love to say that all of our HOAs are huge, 5,000 houses. We do have a lot of those, but it's very, very wide. We have everything from, small kind of condo associations. We have retirement communities. We have coastal Orange County mega mansions. So I don't think there's a one size fit all to that question, but I will say that they all have their own unique problems, their own unique landscapes, their own unique approach. Boards are different, managers are different. So we try our best to tailor our approach to what that community needs and wants. And hopefully we get that feedback from management.
That's great. And then do you have a lot of feedback from management? Like the role of the manager in what you do, how involved is management, HOA management specifically, in your job functions throughout the month?
Unfortunately, we don't get enough. We would like to get more feedback. I think it's a partnership. It's funny you use that word, business partner as opposed to vendor earlier in our conversation. And truly, if it's a partnership, the more feedback we can get, the better service we can provide to the residents. We do our best to anticipate needs, to do what's in the scope of work. But oftentimes the board or the manager or the community at large has a different vision. And if that's not actually told to us or communicated to us via walk or anything, it's hard for us to tailor our approach in that direction. And I think with any of the vendor partners that HOAs have, I think we all want to do a good job. But what that good job means to homeowner A might be different than homeowner B. And if we can get that communication together, I think most of your vendors will do a much better job for the HOA management companies.
So typically on the management side of things, we contract for a once a month inspection.
Yes.
And sometimes a landscape committee member will join and sometimes a board member will join. But to your point, it's not that we give you direction on what vision is, like what they what they envision it to be.
Mhm.
So you might be doing one thing, and the board's like, okay, but we had a different vision.
Sure.
So would that be a recommendation? Is that the board, in conjunction with management, create a vision for what they want?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we as kind of business partners and management, and sometimes like you said with a board member or landscape committee member, we go on these walks and they're just pointing out the onesies into, oh, can you trim this or
Certainly.
pull that plant or put a couple flowers here, and really that's not what the walk should be. The walk should be where do we want this community going? If you're having to meet with your vendor just to get the minimum expectation on that walk, that's not what that walk's about. That walk's about what's the future look like. And I really do recommend to the communities that we manage to get down and put a 10-year plan together, work with management and say, hey, we know turf removal is going to be a big issue coming up. We know water prices are going up. Whatever it happens to be, what the playground needs to be replaced. I'm not sure what you have. Sit down, put a 10-year plan together. And then once a year, let's get together and review that 10-year plan. Did we make any headway? Did we not? Do we need to change it? Is there a new board and their 10-year vision is a little bit different? But having some sort of plan will help us do a better job for the HOAs. And I think it will be better for the manager. So when we go on a walk, we can be hitting those things and say, hey, instead of putting 2 plants here, we already know that next year we're going to renovate this entire area. And in that circumstance, maybe those 2 plants shouldn't go in because it's part of a bigger project or something.
So on every walk, they got to bring their 10-year plan with them.
Well, at least have it in their head.
Sure.
Because a lot of walks we go on, I don't believe that you see a lot of forward thinking in the HOA industry, unfortunately.
So we've been doing it wrong for 40 years?
I'm not saying that. It's just, sometimes when there's a great manager and board partnership, the manager already knows that information in their head. It might not be written down, but it has been communicated well, and then it gets communicated to us well. The hardest part is, when we're first starting a community and we don't know what that is and it hasn't been communicated to us well yet.
Well, and it's important that you meet with them because you're going to bring a lot more talent to, like their vision might not be obtainable, or you might be able to present a different alternative to what they're envisioning. So if they're envisioning Italian cypress and you're like, that's probably not a great idea, here's some alternatives.
Sure.
Absent that feedback, they're going to want Italian cypress.
That's a very, very valid point. And I think to go along with that, it's our job as good business partners to guide you in those directions and tell you, hey, plant palettes do change, albeit slowly, just like paint palettes change. You can go to a community that's painted a certain way and you can really see when that community was built. We can do the same thing with landscape. So we do try and maybe push you away from that Italian cypress into a different plant material that might be a little bit more becoming of your neighborhood, or it might be more based on water usage.
Certainly. A very big subject.
Yeah. Where, hey, we want more grass. And, we have to tell you, listen, the state's going to actually tell you to remove this grass in the next few years. So that good partnership goes a long, long way. I think with any vendor, but especially with landscape, because landscape tends to be one of the larger contracts that HOAs have.
I think between that and utilities is on large land developments, water and which is all irrigation and landscape are the top two. Occasionally, if there's a gated community, community patrol will hit those budgets, but same thing. So great takeaway. Thank you for providing it. So everyone should have a meeting with their landscaper once a year to discuss vision and discuss overall plans.
Yeah, and this should be a meeting that's not your normal landscape walk. It's
Certainly
not your board meeting that we should be attending. None of that. It's a separate whole scoping meeting just to say, hey, where do we want this community to evolve over the next period of time?
And then also you can address challenges at that time, saying, okay, this particular area has been deferred maintenance for a decade, and usually in a ravine, or there might be other problems.
Mm-hmm.
Bring those to note and develop a plan to slowly mitigate that.
100%. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there.
Good. And then credentials and staff qualifications. There's so many landscapers. A lot of times we get many different pricing. but there's also certifications, licenses, and professional affiliations.
Mhm.
So what kind of certifications or organizations that you belong to that
Sure.
help the HOA?
Yeah, I think with this, I always say the barrier to entry to become a landscaper is actually quite low. Well, you need a lawnmower, a truck, and a contractor's license and insurance, and then you can call yourself a landscaper. But really, even partnering with Avalon, you guys really expect a much higher level than that. On staff, I guess at the bare minimum, you need to make sure your vendor does have a license and insurance, because unfortunately, we do compete in the marketplace sometimes with unlicensed vendors, and we can't get to the same pricing structure that they can get to. So, when you look at landscape as a whole, we usually call, tree care is in there as well, and there is a separate license for tree care. So look to see that, if your vendor is doing both of those, they have both of those licensures. But on top of that, it's almost like community managers. You do have to have a business license, but then you can get different education levels. A big one for us will be in the water management side. We have, all of our foremen and irrigators are QUEL certified, which is a qualified water efficient landscaper. It's kind of like the bare minimum for water and water savings. But we also have staff arborists, consulting arborists. We have all of your vendors need to have a QAL, qualified applicator license. We have a level above that called a PCA, which is a pest control advisor. So there's a lot of layers that we have internally, but you should, in your RFP process, have it listed. Not all of these things are required, but it definitely brings a little higher level of professionalism to your landscape operation.
Well, and you bring a good point, is put it in your RFP.
Always.
So that way the association knows who's got the qualifications and who doesn't.
For sure.
So can you list those out again for the benefit of our audience?
Yeah, for sure. They definitely have to have their contractor's license. It's a C27. They'll have to have their tree trimming license if they do any tree work above 15 feet. Then there's the arborist, which is administered by the ISA. We have QUEL, which is a qualified water efficient landscaper. We have a whole series of certifications through either the Irrigation Association, like water manager, certified water manager, and that realm, and the NALP, which is the National Association of Landscape Professionals. And you can get certifications in hardscape, softscape. There's a whole bevy there. So there's a lot of different tracks, I guess is the way to put it. There's not a shortage of certifications and educational opportunities for landscapers. But the last one, they do have to have what is called a QAL. It's a spray license. In order to apply pesticides, we do have to be certified by the state of California in order to apply various pesticides and herbicides.
Do you see other companies performing those services without
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. Unfortunately, again, the barrier to entry to call yourself a landscaper is a lawnmower, a weed eater, and a truck. And I wouldn't say I see it all the time at Avalon jobs. You do have a pretty robust RFP system here, but we do compete in the marketplace quite regularly, unfortunately.
And being unlicensed and still performing the services, they're not going to be following best practices or even what they're legally supposed to do.
You would assume not.
Okay, great. And then services and scope, core services. Can you outline the primary services you provide? And are these specialized or niche services that might differentiate you from other vendors?
Yeah, I mean, our core service is landscape maintenance. That's the table stakes for our industry. It's reoccurring monthly. We do have a construction arm. So when I say construction's landscape construction, we're not building houses. We're putting in landscape, and which is kind of starting from nothing and maybe putting in some block walls and maybe some hardscape.
I didn't know
a monument. We do monuments. I think it's hard to find vendors sometimes that do those.
It is.
So we do that like construction. We have a tree care license, so we do all arbor care, mostly for our existing clients, but we do take on some that aren't. We have a full water management division. We do it under the Elevate brand. So it's not just Harvest Landscape. You could hire us as a water manager outside of our landscape provider service. And we have a chemical department, which is doing mostly like fertilization. There's a lot of interest right now in the HOA world to actually get away from glyphosate, which is Roundup, if you've ever heard that word.
Yes, we sure have.
So,
especially lately.
Yeah, especially lately. So we do have kind of a chemical department, and they do specialty chemicals, and we're making it so that there's other alternatives to maintain the landscape in the way that the customers want, but in a more organic or natural way.
That's excellent. And then customization and flexibility. How flexible are your service packages, and can you tailor services to meet the unique needs and budget constraints of a particular HOA?
This is a really interesting topic. And I'll say that because our cost of doing business over the last 10 years has increased about 30 times.
Oh.
And the average contract has not gone up that far. So we really have, as an industry, not just Harvest, but as an industry, have had to tailor our service offerings to meet kind of the budgetary constraints of an HOA. It's very hard to raise your dues in that quick succession as minimum wage was going up and all that for us. So yes, we have a technology package internally that helps us communicate well with the customer, and we can striate that in any which way that you guys want to open and close work orders, that type of thing. But I think that goes back to the very beginning of our conversation and you telling the audience that we're a business partner.
Yes.
And again, that communication coming to us, we can do literally anything that the customer wants. If you want Disneyland, well, I guess we can't say the word Disneyland on film sometimes, right? But if you want Disneyland and you want, Pluto carved into your shrubs, we can do
topiary,
that.
Yes.
Yeah, topiary.
We've had that before.
Yeah, it just costs a lot of money to do it. So we don't mind doing that. It's the communication. So you talked about that back slope that's been kind of, not handled for many years. That usually comes about as some sort of compromise in a budgetary constraint. You go to the landscaper, hey, we have this amount of money to spend. What can we kind of get for that? It usually the process doesn't work that way, but that ultimately comes out. We have a budget constraint. How many weeks is the rotation going to be? And maybe if we go from a 4-week rotation to a 5-week rotation, we can get to the budget number you're looking for. Not you, but the HOAs are looking for, and still maintain a good quality service.
And as part of the process, like what we do is, we have the same. Every business has the same price increases, and as you said, we're not able to raise our rates by 30%.
You can't.
No, but so what we're doing is we're being more client selective. So we do a lot of research before we bid a client. Has that now increased given the financial constraints you guys are under?
I will say that, I manage the entire sales team, which is 9 employees.
Wow.
Throughout Southern California. And probably 90 to 95% of the RFPs we gather and we do our due diligence on, the existing budget is less than what the marketplace can provide. The marketplace, not just us. And that's, again, that goes back to writing a good RFP that really takes into account what the association needs and then also leaves some room for what the association wants, right? Because there's a core. The grass needs to get mowed and the shrubs need to be trimmed. But sometimes when associations go into the bid process, they're looking for everything. I want the trees included and the flowers and all that. And then they look at the price and say, well, we'll just stay with our existing landscaper because at least our price is lower. So kind of trying to find that good middle ground is difficult. But yeah, it's been hard in our industry as prices have increased to remain flexible. But I think we do a pretty good job of remaining flexible for the clients.
I mean, the biggest challenge for the association is they've had a landscaper for the last decade.
Sure.
So that precedes the inflation.
Yeah.
And they weren't able to raise the prices.
Mm-hmm.
So when they got to rebid, they get shocked because now they're going to be paying market rates.
That's right.
As opposed to someone that's been their partner for 10 years.
Yeah. And it's been a disservice to that partner as well. You probably haven't noticed it because it's gradual. It's kind of like growing hair. your service level probably has decreased over that period of 10 years. And that's what's led you to go out to bid.
Yeah, it would have had to have.
Right.
By
because
definition.
by definition, the chemicals cost more, the labor costs more. So you're getting less than you did 10 years ago if you haven't kind of paced with that. And so, yes, it's a shocker in two ways. It's a shocker because the residents haven't had the landscape that they wanted for a period of time. And now they have to pay the market rate. And it's a difficult situation for some HOAs.
Indeed. And the smaller the association, the more impactful it is on their HOA dues.
Certainly.
Yeah. Quality assurance. So how do you measure the quality and effectiveness of your work? Because that goes back to the inspections or walks that we do on a monthly basis. You know, the boards interpret us as we're doing the quality assurance for the landscaper, and you're suggesting certainly a much better approach that would yield. Because I think if you're walking by and you see a dead shrub, you know you need to fix the dead shrub.
Yeah, that's the bare minimum.
Right. But you know what you're suggesting is, all right, let's use these monthly inspections as or monthly walkthroughs, not necessarily an inspection, to really talk about how we're following our vision and how to make improvements, as opposed to, there's that one sprinkler or there's that one shrub. But if we're not doing that, then what internal programs that you have in place to ensure quality control?
So I think it's kind of bifurcated a little bit in that, that inspection, certainly, if the manager is on the walk and the landscape committee is on the walk, do look at what we've accomplished. I mean, it is our opportunity to show off our work and say, hey, this is where we worked last week and it looks good. But sometimes, like I said, I think the manager or the board member just feels like that inspection is their opportunity to point out all the flaws. And landscape has flaws. It's not a perfect world. It's growing. There's going to be ups and downs. And certainly we want to address those ups and downs. That's a good partnership. But yeah, internally, your landscape vendor, like what we do, we schedule a walk always opposite of the walk that we do with management.
Oh, so you do your own?
We do our own.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So, and then we like to see a different set of eyes. And I think I've seen it before with you. You might have an assistant manager that does kind of the enforcement drive.
Yes.
But then the manager also does it. Maybe it's monthly or quarterly or whatever that happens to be. And we do the same thing. We really want the account manager doing their own walk once a month. But every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, we want the branch manager or the region manager or somebody else that isn't on the property often to do that walk as well, because they'll look and they'll find those little flaws, those little things that are just, for whatever reason, you become blind to because you're there every day.
Certainly.
So we do that internally, and I think all of the better vendors will do that as well.
Oftentimes the perception that the residents and perhaps the board have is on your performance and our performance is the path from the outside to their door.
Yes.
So you could be doing something
great
in a valley,
and
you could be spending hundreds of hours, and no one ever sees that. And we've always suggested that when you guys are doing work like that, to send us photos.
I think that's key. Our technology package actually automatically pushes to management everything we've accomplished for the week. And it has photos. We make our crews take those photos and show, because that's exactly right. This time of year, we're kind of in the springtime right now. And we're doing a lot of what we call fuel modification work.
Oh, yes.
So that's behind the homes, all those kind of native, natural areas. We have to kind of weed eat that or get it, trimmed down, the grasses, so that we can help mitigate fire risk. And that sometimes will take us off our trimming rotation. Also, this time of year, things are blooming. We want them to bloom, the residents want them to bloom. So we're not trimming. So we tend to get behind a little bit right now as an industry. But again, communication is key. Hey, just so you know, your front door might get a week behind because we're mitigating fire risk. And I think residents appreciate that.
Anyone in a fire zone really appreciates it right now, especially if they've got an insurance bill.
Oh, man.
I mean, we're learning so much more, because the perception that people have is you show up, you mow the lawn, you trim some shrubs, and then you're gone.
Sure.
But it sounds like they're much more involved than what the average manager and certainly board or committee member even knows what you're doing.
Yeah, like I said, our technology package is such that everything is transparent. You can see the good, the bad, and the ugly, where we've worked, why we worked, all work orders, open and close pictures, all those different things. But yeah, there is a perception that, we're just there and, unfortunately, it's like the one leaf that's out of place is the one that gets called out, not the 3,000 that we raked the day before. But that's okay. That's part of what we do. And I think management shares that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You don't get a lot of calls just saying, hey, Avalon's doing a great job. Thank you so much. No, you get the complaint calls. My neighbor has a barking dog, or the pool was closed. Why was it closed? Whatever that happens to be. So we take it on the chin a little bit, but that's okay. Communication is key. If the residents know that we care and we're working towards something, I think it's usually, it works out pretty well.
So communication, obviously there's got to be a lot of communication, as landscaping is one of the key major contracts and budget items. What communication channels do you prefer, like email, online portal, and how often do you recommend touching base for the landscaper between the board and the management company?
I think really we need to be, as good vendors and good business partners, able to tailor the way we communicate to the way that the association wants us to communicate, or the manager wants us to communicate. So we have like I said, we have a technology package, and we do communicate a lot that way, and we can custom tailor that to either send out weekly reports or monthly reports or text messages, and vice versa. If you want to send it to us in a smoke signal, that's fine. We can accomplish that. But whatever really is best for that individual community and that individual manager, I think we can accommodate it pretty well. And I think we are customer service people. You are customer service people. So I have no problem tailoring the way we communicate. You don't have to fit into our box. We'll come out of our box and we'll communicate the way you want to communicate. But usually you want something in writing.
Yeah.
Some kind of an email, some kind of a portal, something where it's in writing.
Work orders preferable?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Because that gives you authority. It tells you exactly what the problem is. Oftentimes it includes a picture of whatever the issue is.
Yeah. And then we like to give it back to you again, closed with a picture. And now we know we're not going to please everybody all of the time. We want to please most of the people most of the time. That's kind of it. We'll do everything we can to please everybody all of the time. But I think it's probably that way in management too, right? I mean,
certainly.
There's always.
Yeah, we try to manage expectations, but literally, when we do our drive-throughs of their homes, we actually send out nice letters to the homeowners, because usually they're getting negative. If you're hearing from the management company, it's bad news. So we try to balance that with good news.
So I will say that I was a former client of Avalon when I lived in an HOA, and that was, as a board member, that was one of the best tools. This is off of the landscape thing a little bit, but it's one of the best tools ever as a board member to have, one resident kind of get that naughty notice, put your trash cans away. Mm-hmm. And then you would send out like 2 letters to the neighbors on each side of them that said, hey, thank you very much for, painting your garage or putting your trash cans away religiously. Like that's great. Thank you. So that when the middle neighbor, that kind of was the bad apple, was complaining to his neighbors, they would say, oh, that's funny. I got this really nice letter. And I think psychologically that went very, very far to mitigating some of those problem people at the board meeting.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. And that was exactly what our intention was.
It was great.
Good. And then managing expectations. What steps do you take early in a relationship to align the expectations of timeliness, quality standards, and scope of work?
So we actually have an individual, Nika Richardson, and that's all she does is kind of at the onset of the contract. I think that, with any new relationship, I imagine it's the same for management. When you take on a new client, you really have to dig in a little bit deeper, do a little bit more hand-holding, really ask a lot more questions up front to start to establish that relationship. So she kind of starts off with us. She has a little bit of management experience previously. And she says, hey, these oddball questions that come up, where do you prefer our crew take their break? Can they take it at the clubhouse? Do you prefer them to be off-site? Can we use the park? Can we not use the park? Those are things that don't come up really in the sales process, and they certainly will come up eventually from the residents. So kind of asking those questions through the transition really helps us to kind of set our expectations well. But it goes back to the same business, a partnership thing, which is if as a new vendor partner, if you've had your landscaper for 10 years, they know where all the problems are, where all the problem residents are, and any communication that we can get will help us succeed on your behalf. And so, yes, we have some ways that we can mark that. We have a transition manager that will help smooth that transition out. But really just robust communication cannot be beat when it comes to that transition process.
So proactiveness.
Yes.
Certainly something that's very important with landscaping, because like a broken sprinkler line 3/4 of the way down a slope can lead to a lot of problems. Can you share some examples of proactive measures that you've taken to identify and resolve issues before they escalate?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I always said that if I was going to own my own landscape company, I'd call it Proactive Landscape.
Oh, that's great.
Although one of my good friends actually opened a landscape company and called it Proactive. They're a small company. That's what everybody wants. And it's kind of funny. Our technology package exists because of that exact problem that you mentioned. We went to a large-scale HOA board meeting, and we had our ERP software. We knew all of the inspections that we did and the repairs that we made and all of that. And the board said, this one sprinkler was leaking for 3 days. You guys aren't doing any proactive inspections. And we said, wait, hold on. And got on the computer, and we said, we did 1,200 repairs in the last 30 days. And shockingly, the board member and the manager said, what do you mean? And we turned the laptop around and said, here's a picture of every single repair that we've done on your property in the last 30 days. And they looked at us and said, why don't you just make that available to us? And light bulb, yes, you're right. Transparency is key. And so I think there is a little bit in when the communication breaks down, unfortunately, you assume that nothing's happening. And I think we're like a little hamster on a wheel. In order for your landscape to look good, we are constantly fixing breaks and pulling dead bushes and all of that. It goes back to the pictures. If we can provide you with the pictures, you have the ammo you need to know that we're proactively managing your landscape, and vice versa. Because on a large scale, there's a lot of moving pieces every single day. There's mulch going in and flowers going in and irrigation repairs being made and adjustments. Nozzles get clogged daily.
I would imagine drip irrigation is the worst irrigation to repair.
It's harder because we don't see if, it's underground.
Right. Yeah, it's underground.
So until the plant wilts, we can't see it. But it is good for water savings. Certainly we do enjoy it for that. So, we're constantly having to be proactive.
And then on feedback, so feedback mechanisms specifically.
Okay.
How do you encourage feedback from both the management company and the HOA board and maybe the residents? I don't know how much, I don't know we actually don't know how often residents contact you or contact the crew. Mm-hmm. And what steps do you take to incorporate that feedback into your service?
Well, I will say that residents do communicate. We do push them back to management always, but it is quite common. You have residents out walking their dogs or just exercising, or when we're working next to their house, they want us to take a little bit more off of this plant or something like that. So we get more of that than I think maybe the community realizes. We, typically as a landscaper, we're there more often than anybody. There's a lot of feedback mechanisms. Feedback one is your vendor, us, we want to go to your board meetings. I think sometimes—
Do you really?
Yes, we love going to your board meetings. I know it's after hours, but it's our opportunity to hear from the residents. If somebody has a problem, they're going to bring it to a board meeting, right? And so if we're there in the audience, we can hear it, we can take note of it, work on that quickly. We also can hear a wider range of the board opinions at that point in time. Sometimes the board will appoint one person or a landscape committee, but sitting through the meeting and hearing the landscape report, it gives them an opportunity to, maybe other board members to ask questions that aren't as involved in the landscape. Mm-hmm. So we want to be there for that if possible. You're not putting us at any, we want to be there. In fact, a lot of times, we're not invited, and it's a disappointment. So we have that, through the work order system, obviously. But I think, again, if we could, maybe that 10-year plan that we meet on once a year, that could be part of the agenda. Just a 360 kind of feedback loop. I think most vendors want to do a good job. You want to be a good management company. We want to be a good landscaper. And so we don't mind having that feedback come to us. And a lot of times in our industry, the only time we get negative feedback is when we're getting replaced. It's like, hey, you haven't been doing this for this many years, so you're getting replaced. And it's like, nobody's ever actually said that. We can do that. We didn't know that you wanted Mickey Mouse carved into your shrubs. You should have just asked. We would have done that, that kind of thing.
Have you ever done one thing that we implemented more than a year ago is now that we send a quarterly survey to our boards on all of our departments. So we want to know where we're failing at. Is there any proactive querying of the board or the management company as part of your practice?
So we try. It's hard because we have to go through you. I mean, not you, but management
company.
So when we sent out our contract, we also sent out just a quick survey of, hey, who are the board members? Where do they live? Mm-hmm. What are kind of your, these quick, what are you looking for in landscape? When is your budget? This is a key piece. Not every budget is January 1.
Of course not.
Right? But sometimes that's not communicated to us. So we need to know if we need an increase or, how we can help you plan for your budget expenditures. Well, if your budget's May 31st or some random date, we don't know that. So we ask that question, when's your budget? So we can help you.
Smart question to ask.
Yeah. And, where do you want us to take a restroom break? Those little things. And I would say less than 20% of those surveys get filled out. And I don't know, I truly don't have the answer if it's just not getting to the board, mm-hmm. if it's if the board doesn't feel comfortable giving that information. If I don't know, but we don't get it. So I would love to do exactly what you're saying, send these surveys out. And we do a little bit. The email addresses that we do gather, we will send some things out, or just a really quick Merry Christmas or something like that kind of thing. But we are working for the HOA directly, but we do work on your request, your behalf. So a lot of the feedback that we get is through management, not directly from the board.
Well, and it presumes that the manager will take those questions to the board to provide additional feedback.
We hope. It not always happens, but we would hope. And if you're doing it on your side and you're providing that, even with us not querying, that's mm-hmm. okay too, as long as that feedback's coming to us. That's the important part.
Certainly. And then long-term relationship building. Obviously key in our industry. What strategies do you use to foster longer-term partnerships rather than just a transactional relationship? For example, do you offer training or workshops or periodic check-ins to maintain alignment with expectations?
I think I said it earlier, which is this is your home in an HOA. So we really try and partner on community events first and foremost. We want to be integrated into the fabric of your community. So we'll help you do an Easter egg hunt at Easter, or a spring fling if that's what you're into, or a snow day, that kind of thing. I think there's a lot of landscape ancillary services we can provide for those little kind of social events.
Oh, great.
I think that helps. I think, definitely being a strategic partner, having that 1 year kind of, let's get together, you can give us a critique, almost like a performance review, and we can look at your 10-year plan. I think that really goes a long way to building, surety in the relationship. I think that, just us doing a good job month over month goes a long way for everybody. Communication, when we tell you, so on our large communities now, we actually provide a 52-week rotation map. So we actually,
that's excellent.
For very large communities, we say, hey, this is where we're going to be for the next 52 weeks.
Well, and we use those and we put them on the websites.
Yes.
Which are all public facing. So when residents call us, we can say, you can always refer to the rotation map on the website, because they're like, when are you coming to my house?
Right. And so we'll publish that for the whole year. And sometimes we won't meet that expectation. But again, it builds really good partnership and credibility when we can call you and say, hey, we're behind. And I think with the residents as well, they say there's going to be a time something happens. I don't know, some catastrophe or the weather spikes in a month that we weren't expecting, or, we have a labor issue or something. We'll get behind, we'll catch up. Mm-hmm. But, just communicating. And I think in our industry, a lot of times trust is eroded when we try and hide those things, as opposed to just tackling them. So again, we go to transparency. Let's just put it all out there. Everybody can see what we're doing. And I think that builds that credibility and trust, just knowing kind of where we're at and being honest with it.
Yeah, everyone can accept when there are issues that come up.
Always.
But if we don't know about an issue, we find out later that something wasn't done, completely different perspective.
I think that erodes trust immediately. Yeah. It's hard to rebuild because, again, we don't have the one-on-one relationship that management has. You guys are in a board meeting, you're communicating via email. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, and we, as the vendor, don't have that direct line of sight necessarily always within this relationship.
Recommendations on working together more effectively. So best practices for HOAs.
Sure.
Based on your experience, what are the top 3 recommendations you would give an HOA to have a more productive and harmonious relationship with the business partners?
I think knowing that we are here to help, we are not an adversary. If you approach the relationship with that, we will approach it with that. And not just we, Harvest, we as all of the service providers that you have, knowing that it is a business partner relationship, I think goes a long way. So I think communication. I sound like a broken record, but that's really the firewall we have here a little bit. But yeah, just in general, what are your expectations? What do you want to do? And I think all of us can kind of meet you there. But if we don't know what that is, we'll just go about our daily life, and sometimes that breaks down over time.
Yeah, I see more and more importance in you having direct communication with the board, either by attending the meetings, which would be very helpful, because the manager can only manage so much. They're managing multiple, and usually multiple in a portfolio.
Sure.
So maintaining a direct line, and also, no one's safe when the board changes as well. So having a plan and staying communicative with the board members themselves, probably something very important.
I like that within context. I think, again, we are an overall ecosystem. And if we're communicating with the board and cutting management out of that, I think that's a problem, and vice versa. If there are issues with our service and the how we're providing the service, and the manager isn't giving us that, maybe they have a good relationship with us or whatever it is, or they're just too busy or whatever that happens to be, and we don't get that negative feedback, we can't correct. And so I agree with you. We love to have that one-on-one relationship with our boards, but it has to go in conjunction with continuing to loop management on what's going on, and vice versa.
Yeah, my thought when I said that was that attending board meetings would be very helpful, because that's with management 100%. Present and the board members.
We want to be there.
And also your future board members are often in the audience as well.
Always.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, if somebody's going to run for the board, they're going to go to at least one meeting.
Yeah, indeed. So if they can see the work, because again, oftentimes the perception is simply whatever path they took to their front yard. If nothing was done, then you're not doing anything.
Yeah, plenty of walks we go on, and we start the walk right at their house.
Oh,
the board
sure,
member,
of course.
Right?
Yeah, of course. Clear roles and responsibilities. So how important is it for the HOA to define the roles and decision-making authority and guidelines for partner interactions? And what can the HOA do to make that clear? Like, who do you take direction from?
Yeah. Again, this goes to, it's nice to go to the board meeting. We'll take the direction from what the contract says. The contract sometimes says that management is the director of the association, and that is through whatever meeting apparatus you guys have gone through, that authority has been bestowed on management, and we have to take that for the weight of it, if that's how the contract is written. If the contract says by majority vote, we need to know what the majority vote was in order to take that direction. Most of the time, most associations will have somebody on the board or landscape committee that has a vested interest in landscape, and they kind of defer some of the day-to-day tasks to that member because he or she enjoys it. That breaks down pretty rapidly when you have a contentious board.
A divided board, yes. We actually have a video series on divided boards.
That becomes much harder for vendors to who to take direction to. And again, when it gets that contentious, we go back to the contract and say, who's giving us direction directly in the contract? Because we do want to be customer service focused, and we do want to accomplish what the board wants as a whole. But if there is a divided board, we're gonna do what the contract says, and that's that.
I mean, there are times where we've been asked, directed by board members to do something unusual, like, okay, tear down those 6 60-foot pine trees.
Sure. And
you tear them down, and the rest of the board's like, what did you do? And we want them back.
Well, you can't put them back.
And then we're like, what? I mean, we got direction one time to build a fountain, and this community had maintenance crew, and there were 2 board members that gave us directions. Okay, and they were on the maintenance committee with the authority to do it. So we built a fountain, and the next meeting, the board goes, "Who approved the fountain?"
I have a funny story that way too. I had an association that was doing some tree trimming, and they were probably 20 years behind on tree trimming. And so we walked with the selected board member who would point out 1 out of every 20 trees that she wanted trimmed. Okay, let's trim this one. Then we'd walk by 15 trees that needed to be trimmed, and then pick out another one. Oh, this limb is kind of overhanging over the yard, so just lop it off. And that goes against every industry standard or practice that we'd ever do. And so that comes back to the selectivity. At some point, we got to the end of the walk, and she said, okay, when can I have your bin? And I said, this just isn't our type of work. You're in a position, I will advise you, and I'll put it on a piece, a nice arborist report, but I'm going to advise you as a professional that you need to special assess your community. You need to get all of these trees trimmed and get back to a standard, and then get back onto a 3 or 5 year plan, because there was so much deferred maintenance and so many bad limbs and so many trees that were a danger to the community. I didn't feel comfortable picking out those 3 trees. Because what happens if one of the trees falls on a house, and she defers back to me and said, well, that guy's an arborist, and he said it was fine. He went on the whole walk with me and said everything was good. And that wasn't what I said at all. So, sometimes there are some, board members who have their own agendas or those kinds of things. And we do rely a lot on management to really kind of say, hey, this guy's on his own. You're taking direction from the board as a whole. I will give you the official minutes to tell you what to do.
Yeah, I mean, we push, we advise our boards, and we try to push the best practices that any communication to the business partner needs to be in writing.
Yes.
Preferably through a work order.
Yes.
Because that spells out budget constraints as well. Now, does that happen all the time? Not necessarily.
Sure.
We don't have a way around it because, someone's going to want what they're going to want. So we try to work within that framework as best as we can.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you guys are faced that all the time.
Yeah, we like to have it in writing, even if it's a text message. You go back to that communication thing. We want it in writing. We want a signature. We want it officially. But at the bare minimum, I want something
in writing.
That says, go do this.
Preferably with a picture of the problem.
That would be ideal.
So continuous improvement. How can both the vendor and the HOA work together to refine the service relationship? And I think we're probably repeating ourselves.
Yeah, a little bit.
Do you have the process to review annual reviews and performance evaluations that you find particularly valuable?
I guess I put the cart before the horse on that question. I'm sorry.
That's fine. No, I mean, we got there. But So you have the regular process improvement and communication.
I think continuous improvement is interesting. It's an interesting concept because with landscape, it's getting older. So there is aging plant material, and there is this kind of perception in the world that like plants will grow forever, and they don't.
You're right. There is a perception that they will grow forever.
Yeah, like you're going to maintain it, and okay, well, we will to the best of our ability, but there's certain things that get woody or age out. So there different plants do have kind of horticultural normal lifespans. An oak tree, sure, that will live beyond your lifespan, hundreds of years. But not everything is like that, and the needs of those plants change as they grow. Right. In some communities, in like San Diego and Orange County, there's a plant material called Cape honeysuckle. It has like a red flower. And in some communities, they've allowed that plant material to grow, over my head, 10 feet tall. And that material can be maintained as a low growing almost carpet
Without getting woody.
And that material, you can take an overgrown landscape and cut it to the ground. I mean, look, 10 inches off the ground and renovate it, and it'll look beautiful. And that's just a project you can do every 20 years or whatever it happens to be.
Nice.
It's beautiful. On the flip side of it, acacia, another very common plant.
Acacia rhododendron.
Yeah. It's now, it's a fire danger, and it's used a lot. But if it's gotten really big, it hasn't been maintained for many years, and we cut it to the ground, it dies.
I mean, for a long time, that was the go-to thing for slopes.
It was.
It was perfect.
Everybody thought it was great until they found out that it burns very, very hot in fires because of the oils that are in it. So they're aggressively trying to pull that out of some areas, or at least carve pathways within it so that firefighters fire break. Not necessarily a fire break, but fire access.
Yeah, because I mean those get intertwined and it's like a jungle.
It's a jungle. You can't walk through it.
Yeah.
No. So in certain community or certain jurisdictions, we are having to carve paths or keep it lower. But that type of plant material, we can't renovate. I mean, it just is there. So if you want to take it out and put something else in, it's a much bigger project than the Cape honeysuckle, which we can take from really big, make it small, and then continue to maintain it small. And so I think that's it. When you look at kind of that continuous improvement is having that, hey, community, it might cost a little bit to reduce this honeysuckle, and it's going to look different. The community is going to vastly look different because instead of 6-foot hedges, we're going to have 16-inch ground cover.
Right.
Is that okay?
Well, and
or do you want a different look?
What I love is now that the landscapers are providing, this is what it's going to look like. So you actually show us photos,
of course,
of what it's going to look like.
I think that's also kind of getting a good service provider in the landscape industry that scale provides. Some of the smaller guys, might not have that water management division. They might not have, we were just talking about licensure,
yes.
But those capabilities to give you ROI calculations on replacing turf, how much water are you going to save there, or on irrigation controllers, or that type of rendering, as we usually call it, a rendering in our vernacular, which is we take a picture, erase the landscape that's on there, digitally put a new landscape on there so that the residents and the board members can kind of get a mock-up of what it could look like in the future.
And then on process improvement, like I'm a nut about process improvement. We improve every month. We look at operations.
Sure.
And we say, okay, how can we improve things? And some of these involve tools and technology, those type of things that augment what we do. Nobody sees behind the scenes what we're doing. And just like a landscaper, we're associating you with a 26-inch Toro,
sure,
and a gas-powered line trimmer.
Sure.
But I'm sure there's probably a lot going on behind the scenes.
A lot, yeah.
What are you guys doing in terms of improving the technology to do your job?
Well, I think
for the boots on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think that our industry as a whole has had to evolve quite rapidly with technology for that reason, or for the reason that labor's gotten so expensive. So, yes, like the residents don't like to see the Roundup use. And so as an industry, we've shifted to long-lasting pre-emergents that have a very, very low toxicity that will prevent the weeds from coming, right? And so it's just a different shift, which reduces labor, does a lot of different things. We're using a lot of what we call growth regulators. So it basically a spray you can put on a plant, and it tells the plant to grow more slowly or branch more, that kind of thing. Which again will reduce our labor a little bit. But certainly there are some laws that are changing, that have changed, that are coming into effect that limit the importation of gas engines into California. So you will see electric equipment being rolled out by most vendors. I think we have about 25% of our branches now converted purely to electric. So
is that standard for the industry?
I think we're a little ahead of the curve, but I think all landscapers are starting to go that way because it finding the gas mowers is a little bit harder. Also, the big change you'll start to see over the next 5 to 10 years is those big lawnmowers you're talking about.
Yes.
They're going to be autonomous. They're going to
no kidding.
They're going to drive themselves.
Robots.
The technology is almost there. We have small ones already in the field that are, not a Roomba size. They're much larger than a Roomba, but they're kind of a smaller a piece that's doing, clubhouses, really high impact areas where we can mow it every day, as opposed to doing it once a week. So it's always looking pristine.
Very nice.
But we had started looking into them, and others they have much larger mowers. The big, like what you think of as our guys riding on those, 46-inch mowers.
Yes.
Those ones are going to be electric, and they're going to be autonomous. And you'll have one guy kind of watching 3 mowers at a time. They have lots of safety. It's like a Tesla or something like that. I don't know if that's a good word to say or a bad word to say in today's political environment, but they have the sensors that they have where, if a kid runs out in front of it, they'll stop and shut down. If anybody messes with it, it notifies us. They have GPS and lots of things.
Will it automatically pick up dog poop?
No, it won't do that.
Darn.
But it will notice it, and it'll go around it.
Oh, it'll go around
Oh,
it?
yeah. And we can program them. It's still in its not infancy. I would say it's getting to maturity, but we could mow your association's logo into the grass with them.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I mean it's really
Board meeting Tuesday night.
You could. I mean, maybe not that many words.
Right,
maybe
yeah,
just
yeah.
one word. But yeah, it's coming, and it has to
Very
come.
interesting.
The
Very
only,
interesting.
as we had said earlier, these landscape contracts haven't paced the cost to do business. And so we're actively looking for those type of technologies to improve the overall look, because if we keep the landscape contract the same, but the mower is mowing it by itself, that gives us more time to trim the roses and make those look pretty.
But I'm sure that the cost of those electric motors far exceeds, or the
Correct.
autonomous ones far exceed the cost of the gas mowers that someone rode on.
Yeah, it's about 3 to 5x at this point.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So
But
we're looking at a 5-year return.
at least we do capitalize the big equipment anyways.
No.
That's natural for us. Small equipment we're going through all the time, though, with the hedge trimmers, the weed eaters. But residents do like the electric. I will say the mowers are a little quieter, but because of the sound of the blade, actually, it's all like a jet engine. It has a lot of sound to it. But the hedge trimmers, the weed whips, and all that kind of stuff, residents do like it. It's considerably quieter, and our crews actually like it because they're lighter weight and they have a little bit more torque. So
they're lighter weight. I always thought that the batteries would
the
make
battery is heavy, and they wear it as like a backpack, and they don't like that. But
I
the
see.
equipment themselves, it's not bad. So, but that technology continues to improve as well. So slowly but surely, it's getting there. I'm just saying, in 5 years, 10 years time, I think a landscape crew might look a little bit different.
So identifying and assessing common problems. What are the most common problems when dealing with an HOA and their management companies? And how do you typically overcome these issues?
Whew.
I'm sure it's a little bit of a difficult question, but we want to know, or I want to know what I'm doing wrong, what my staff is doing wrong, and how I can improve it.
Our number one issue, and not necessarily with Avalon, I'll make that clear, is not being paid timely. Understand that, more than 60% of landscape operations for your community is a person doing it. And that person does get a paycheck weekly or every other week.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we send the bill to you, and it's net 30, we kind of expect that bill to come back to us as paid. And you would be shocked at what the AR on our side of it looks like sometimes when associations aren't paying. And sometimes it's not the property manager's fault. Sometimes it is. But sometimes it's just the board member. You're waiting for those 2 signatures and they're sitting on it and they're not paying it or whatever. And we have to fork that money out. I mean, that money is going out. And so that's an issue for the industry as a whole because our profit margins are slim. So our cash flow is a little slim. So that's an issue. Communication, I know I've said this like 15,000 times already, but we can't fix what we don't know needs to fix.
Of course.
And I think, overall, the property management industry, a lot of the managers are a little bit overworked, and they might have a portfolio that's a little bit large for what they have time to administrate, and so we kind of just don't get the feedback that we need to do the task that we need to do. Overall, I mean, it's good. We have good vendor partnerships, business partnerships. I don't have a whole lot of complaints there. Can they improve? Certainly. but most of it comes down to communication. And most of the time we get fired for poor communication.
You don't know about a problem until you get the termination notice.
But vice versa. If I'm not communicating well to management and saying, hey, we're off our rotation, or, whatever happens to be, if I'm not communicating well, that's why I get fired. So just having it all the way around is key.
So pay within the contract terms,
Please.
within 30 days,
Yes.
and then be communicative of problems.
That's pretty simple.
Okay, great. Well, those are the two things we need to focus on. So thank you.
Yeah.
That was the intent. So contractual clarity.
Ooh.
This is such a gray area with landscape because the perception is that you're going to fix anything that's green.
Yes.
So how often do you encounter issues rising from unclear contracts or scope of works? And what can be done to ensure more straightforward agreement from the start?
I think from the start, the RFP should be clear. Many times in our industry, we have a very, very limited scope of work given to us. Now, every vendor, every landscape vendor will have their standard of work. How often we mow the lawn and how often we trim the lawn. What we want from management is to define the contract. What do you want us to do? Like I said, we can carve Mickey Mouse into topiaries, no problem, if that's what you want us to do. And I think a lot of times the managers are a little bit rushed into this RFP situation where the board says, I've had it with the landscaper, they're not communicating with me, everything's gone, go get bids. And then, they're, for whatever reason, they're either rushed into that bid process, but we sometimes don't get complete maps. We don't, have a walk to outline kind of the expectations of the board before we bid the work.
They didn't tell you about the 30 acres of fuel mod?
The 30 acres of fuel mod should be included or excluded. So having a really clear scope of work helps us to price the property right. And it actually does a good service to the HOA, right? I mean, if we know everything, we can give you a good price. If we don't, it tends to be priced higher because we just don't know, right? So I think that's that. And then on the other side of it is once the contract is in place, that, again, maybe that review, we kind of look at it every year and say, some contracts might include free mulch. Let's just say that's included in there. I think that's a fairly common thing that landscapers will include. And we say, hey, look, we need a 4% increase this year. Our costs have gone up. And the association has every right to say, hey, how about a 3% increase and you don't give us the mulch anymore? Something like that. So having that is interesting to us and having a good way to communicate that way. But yeah, I think just that there's the clarity comes from the onset of the RFP, having a distinct contract that we can all operate from, and we can, and that the board understands that that's what we're operating under.
So how do you address the 10-year-old contract?
That's a hard one because I'm sure you have some too.
I do.
Yeah. You at some point you have to just pull it by the root and just say, hey, look, the wording in this contract hasn't been updated. Your contract states that you need to have X amount of labor, and that was based on 1997 rates. And let's just sit down and have a conversation about what it really takes to do your association, what the language of the contract should be. All of us vendors have our own contract, and you have your own contract.
We do.
And so we sign your contract, and it has very, it's written in a way that protects your clients. And it's not that my contract doesn't protect your clients, it's just you've written it your way. But a lot of associations will have their lawyer look at it too and make certain changes to it or whatever that happens to be. And we're easy amenable to that, but in a lot of our contracts, they just use ours. They use our scope of work. And then if something isn't exactly what they anticipated, and we say, well, that's exactly what's written in the contract, but nobody ever read. Nobody.
Well, yeah. And even if a board reviews and approves a contract, a subsequent board
would
not have done it.
Right.
And only they only get a contract when there are issues.
Yeah.
Like there's no proactiveness to have a board member review anywhere from a 3 to maybe a 15-page landscape contract. It's just
40 pages.
40 pages.
I mean, it could be because the scope of work is 15 pages.
That's true.
Think about that. Just the contract itself might only be 15 pages, but then you have the scope of work, you have the line items. It can be quite heavy. And you need to use, more modern industry terms. I think about you took over an association, I remember in like 2012, and you looked at the existing contract. And I remember you sending me the sheet because the approved chemicals included DDT. And that was their contract they had. And we all had a good laugh about it, right? Because, obviously we weren't going to use DDT on their property. Or even we couldn't buy it if we wanted to. But yeah, I think with those old contracts, it's just having a good partnership and saying, hey, look, let's review this. We do have to constantly review it. I get it. Sometimes you just don't rock the boat, and
yeah, it keeps going, right?
Yeah, we have a good relationship, and then you just can't keep going. But at some point, you do just need to kind of bite the bullet and ride it. I will say though that when the new board comes on and they expect something different that's in the contract, having a good communication and a good conversation about it, I haven't had that ever go wrong. Where they say, hey, how come you're not doing this? And quite frankly, I expect this to be done. And we say, well, let's look at the contract. It doesn't actually outline that we should do that. We can certainly do that for you. We can put an amendment in here. Maybe it costs something, maybe it doesn't. But again, I've never had that go awry when they actually see the hard facts. They say, oh, okay, no problem.
If I could make a suggestion. So when we have a new board member come on board, we send them through a series of training videos, some of which they watch, some of which they don't.
Sure.
And we provide them with certain information. But what would be helpful, especially on contracts like landscape and other vendors, and I just thought of this, so it's not something that I had in my mind, is it'd be nice if we had a contract summary.
That would be great. So we have it internally. Maybe we should make that available.
Yeah, because as a part of a new board member package, we could say, here's a contract summary, rather than here's the 25-page contract for you to review, which they oftentimes won't review it. Or even if they did, they might not know what it means.
Yeah.
So just a suggestion.
No, that's a great idea. Our baseline is kind of like what our standard of care, right?
Mm-hmm.
What Harvest wants to provide to every customer is kind of our baseline. So we do have internally, when we set up your association as one of our our properties, we have like a cheat sheet as far as that goes. It says, hey, this particular contract deviates from our standard of care in these ways. They get free mulch, irrigation is included, or they have a specially negotiated price on acacia plants. It's half price for them, or whatever uniqueness to that association came up within the RFP process. We have that internally. Now, it's not quite written the way you're saying because it's just telling us how it deviates from our standard, but we could do that. And I think that would be good. We do it because we do have new account managers that start, and we don't want an account manager that's brand new to not know that they should be doing, hey, this particular property, we mow the grass twice a week. Right. And then all of a sudden he hops on and he's only mowing it once a week. And everybody says, why is our grass not being mowed twice a week anymore? And he's, I don't know, that's just what our industry does.
And that is one of the questions that a lot of new board members have. It's like, well, when are they here and what do they do?
Right.
And for us to okay, we're going to summarize a 40-page contract might be a little difficult. So a summary would be very helpful.
Yeah, and the scope of work helps a lot in that because the actual agreement has a lot of indemnity clauses and how you terminate us and force majeure and all these kind of lawyer terms. But for your average board member, your average landscaper, that scope of work, which is maybe only 4 pages, that's the key. It says we're going to mow the grass every week during these months. We're going to mow it every other week during those months. We're going to trim the shrubs in this way. Maybe you require the ground cover to be beveled at a 45-degree angle or something that will be contained within that scope of work. And I think that's the most important part as far as administration of the day-to-day tasks of the job.
And one thing I'm going to go off script here, but it's a common problem is that when we get an invoice from a landscaper and it's for irrigation parts or certain parts, and the boards review every invoice that we have. So we don't autonomously approve them. They all go through the board. But often we get a question of why is this hunter head $80 or $50 when I can go and buy a hunter head from Home Depot for $15? And certainly they're not the same product, but in the minds of the board member or whoever's reviewing them, perhaps a committee member, they don't understand the difference. Can you maybe explain the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly the hunter head you're talking about,
Well,
but
just
generally,
generally.
I'm going to say there's two parts to this answer. Part one is just understand that for us to get that particular sprinkler head, somebody had to place the order for it. Somebody had to drive and pick it up. Somebody had to deliver it. So all that's contained in the cost. We're also generally using a commercial grade product.
Yes.
That lasts longer. It's made of a little bit more rigid plastic that will last to maybe recycled water if you have it, or those types of things. So there is a cost. And then a lot of what you buy at kind of the local box store, from a sprinkler head perspective, is just a sprinkler head. Where we buy things that have more features. One, maybe it regulates the pressure of the water coming out of it. So it makes the spray a little bit more even and saves water for the association. Or it also might have like a check valve in it. So again, if, the lowest head on a line, if it's on a slope, when you turn the water off, not all the water just drains out of that head. It stays in the pipe. So when we turn the water on again, it doesn't hammer, that kind of thing. You don't lose water. So there are these features, I think, that they look the same on the outside, but they're actually internally a different product altogether. And there is a little bit of a markup for just getting the product to where it is.
And you've got to advance the funds as well.
100%.
And wait to get paid.
And we want that in writing when you approve that work order, hopefully, or the contract to say that we can charge you up to a certain amount per month based on those kinds of irrigation repairs. The second side note of that is a lot of these products actually change price quite rapidly.
Oh.
Yeah. So like big sprinklers, there is more of a fixed cost. But when you look at like, a T or PVC pipe, they're really pegged to the price of oil. PVC is made from oil. So they can...
And I don't think anyone in the audience understood that.
No, yeah.
Or understands that.
No, I understand that these products tend to be $1 or 50 cents, but our system actually communicates with our suppliers and changes those prices real time. So if the price of oil goes down, then the price of your slip fix goes down. If it goes up, it goes up. Now, again, it's within a range and it's not that sprinkler you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Really what we see is the valves.
Oh.
I think people see a valve and they're like, $400 to fix a valve? What the heck? And then you say, well, we actually had to excavate the box. We put the new valve in, we put new gravel on the bottom. There's a lot more, I think, sometimes that goes into these projects, and it takes them a couple hours to do. And, but the price, it's like when it's, I can increase the price of every slip fix from 50 cents to 75 cents and nobody would notice. But you take a valve and you'd increase it $20 and everybody's like, it's $400. It's an expensive amount. But again, look in the context of your landscape. Your house might have 4 to 8 valves, and each one of your controllers at your association might have 48 valves. So
big difference.
You might have thousands of valves in your association. So if you have 2 or 3 of them breaking every month, try to get out of, well, I've lived in my house for 20 years and not one of the valves have ever broken. And it's like, yeah, but you only have 5 and we have 3,500. So
big difference.
Yeah.
And then timely decision making. So how significant is the impact on delayed decision-making by a board on the management to perform your services efficiently? And how do you suggest improving that process?
I think, we can maintain landscape nearly indefinitely without any input. Maintain. We're not going to improve your property without good input all the time, continuously. So, there are those fractured boards that we had talked about earlier that just kind of go into this homeostasis and they don't approve anything. And by definition, because the plant material is aging out, the association is declining without those decisions being made.
Certainly.
But, as far as mowing the grass every week, we don't need you to tell me to mow the grass every week. We're going to do that regardless, if that makes any sense.
Well, there's also areas where we need to remove a large section of plant material that's end of life, or irrigation problems they're like, well, let's get a bid, it's difficult on our side because if a bid comes in from you,
sure,
and it's $12,000
sure,
to repair irrigation system, oftentimes the board will go, well, if it's $12,000, let's get another bid,
yeah,
which then pushes that time frame to resolution, which causes more damage going forward.
Yeah, and we don't like that either. I think in most of our contracts that we write, there is a minimum threshold that we can kind of just charge to mitigate that.
Sure.
Right. Maybe it's $1,000, maybe it's $1,500, something like that. That says, hey, we're gonna patch it up for you. Just to get it repaired. And really, a good vendor, it's not going to just say, hey, you're not going to make a decision, so I'm just going to let it die. We're going to allocate labor to hand water that area, right? Now, that means that something else might fall behind, unfortunately.
Because you're doing hand watering, so you're taking labor away from other areas.
Exactly, because we're there. But we don't want to do that. But what's the alternative? Allowing 9,000 square feet of landscape just to completely perish. I don't think that any of us want that. But it does happen. I mean, I will tell you that some boards are paralyzed to make a decision. Maybe their funding is low, maybe whatever it happens to be, their situation, or there's disagreement on the board, or you have to wait for other vendor proposals. But again, go back to communication. Just tell us that. Say, hey, listen, this decision is not going to happen tomorrow. What can we do to mitigate loss until we can get this decision done? And we can give you solutions for that. Maybe we hire a water truck to come and spray the landscape once a week from a big, like a construction site water truck. We've had that happen before. And that might cost you $1,000 a month or something to do. But in the context of allowing everything to die when it's a 110-degree heat wave in the summer, it might be the right decision to make. So just communicate with us. We're okay. If you want to go check our prices versus somebody else, I think that's prudent sometimes for associations, and go do it. Do what you need to do. It's harder though when it's the fractured board and they can't come to an agreement, because the association just comes into this pause mode. And I think it's probably the same for you. And it's not just landscape. It's like trying to move forward. And that's when the board just needs to get together and say, hey, let's work together to work together. Let's find the common ground we can find.
Yeah, we work towards that all the time. It's a common problem. So if it's an issue for you, it's certainly an issue for us.
Sure.
So, all right. Well, great.
All right.
Anything more to add?
Oh, man, I don't know. This is a whirlwind. I think this is our first, right?
It is,
so. I hope I didn't repeat myself too often on these things. I just say that we enjoy what we do. We like working with Avalon. We like working in the HOA industry. It's a partnership, and I think your landscape providers will go a really long way to make the quality of life for our residents better. We are the big contract. I get it, but if you need to lean on us for some things, we don't mind. We're in this boat together. So if like I said, we're going to do a Easter event, we can provide some plants to give away at your Easter event. That doesn't cost us a lot. Or if it's the other way around, hey, this board just needs some help with strategic planning and budgeting. Your managers are really good at a lot of things, but we're great at landscape budgeting. And you don't have to be the expert in that. We can help you. We can sit down and say, this is what's going to cost over the next 15, 20 years to do what you want to do. Or, hey, landscaper, we're kind of in a pickle. Our fire insurance went 10x. What can you do to help us mitigate that? I don't know. Maybe we can come up with a solution on your fuel mod to help reduce that bill, or maybe we can sacrifice something in the contract, in order to accomplish what you need to. I mean, it just happens, and I think we're flexible. I think we want to be flexible, but just communicate with us, talk to us. What do you need? How can we help you? Can we be a real part of your community? And I think you'll get a long way with that.
Well, great. So this has been with Adam Orman from Harvest Landscape. We appreciate it. Thanks for all your insight. There's been some great takeaways, and stay tuned for the next vendor.
All right.
Support partner.
Business partner?
Business partner.
Oh, there we go.
In this business partner podcast. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
I really appreciate it.
You bet.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this Avalon Management educational video. And as always, make it a great day.